Madam President.
The senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Madam President. The senator from Missouri is exactly right. We're going to hear so much about this, and the reason is, as the American people hear about this so-called election bill, what they're realizing, it is not something that's going to make their local election safer. It is something that is going to put that power into Washington, D.C. Now, what we are hearing from the majority leader and the Democratic leadership is they've got to get rid of the filibuster in order to push forward this election bill, adding states, packing courts, all of this laundry list of a socialist agenda that they are planning to execute. So what I want to do today for a couple of minutes is just walk us down memory lane as to what people have had to say, our Democratic colleagues have had to say about the filibuster. Now, in May of 2005, then Senator Joe Biden came to the floor and he vigorously jumped into the middle of a debate over the filibuster. He said that things would go very wrong if his colleagues decided to blow up the rules to get their way. What's interesting about Senator Biden's position is that it had almost nothing to do with his policy goals. And here's his quote, and I quote, "Folks who want to see this change want to eliminate one of the procedural mechanisms designed for the express purpose of guaranteeing individual rights. And they also have a consequence and would undermine the protections of a minority point of view in the heat of majority excess," end quote. He understood at that point in time the importance of preserving the Senate's institutional power and abiding by standards that not only welcome but require deliberation and compromise. Well, what a difference a few years and a Senate majority can make. Today, we're having the exact same debate, but the power my Democratic colleagues won in the last election has changed their minds about breaking the Senate to get their way. Problem is, the Senate is not broken. It does not need their changes, but the rules no longer matter to the majority leader, even though he said as recently as 2017, and I quote, "Let us go no further down this road. I hope the Republican leader and I can, in the coming months, find a way to build a firewall around the legislative filibuster, which is the most important distinction between the Senate and the House. Without the 60-vote threshold for legislation, the Senate becomes a majoritarian institution like the House, much more subject to the winds of short-term electoral change." Well, my. How about that? He understood the dangers of legislative whiplash even when he was in the minority. So did my colleague, Senator Durbin, who said in 2018 he believed that ending the filibuster would, and I'm quoting him, "be the end of the Senate as it was originally devised and created going back to our founding fathers," end quote. Well, I would ask the gentlemen from New York and Illinois, what happened here? What changed their mind so drastically? They've done a 180. I'd ask the same question of many of my Democratic colleagues. In 2017, 32 Senate Democrats, yes, that is correct, 32, many of whom are still serving in this chamber today, signed on to a bipartisan letter in support of the filibuster. Now, they too have changed their minds. Makes you wonder, what is everybody on the Democratic aisle drinking these days? This is no way to run the world's greatest deliberative body, but it's a great way to destroy it. And between 2017 and today, 32 Senate Democrats have changed their mind. about how to handle the filibuster. Over the past year, we've watched Joe Biden and the Democrats attack more than one institution forming the foundation of this nation. The Supreme Court, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, limits on the power of the executive, and now the Senate rules have all proved to be inconvenient to their agenda and ending up on the chopping block. That's where they're putting them. My Democratic colleagues may be frustrated, but that is just too bad. The Senate was not designed to rubber stamp legislation that is so belligerently foolish it can't tempt a single Republican vote, not one, no. The Senate was designed to protect the American people and the institution itself from short-sighted leadership. My colleagues claim that all they're asking for is one teeny little carve-out, just one. But I would remind them that there's only so much carving you can do before you reduce the entire thing to dust. And based on their track record, we have no reason to trust that they'll stop carving and put down the knife rather than use it to hold the Senate hostage the next time they can't scrunch up the votes to check something off their to-do list. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Florida.
Madam President, since the founding of our republic, the Senate has existed to encourage extended debate and protect the rights of the minority party. Over the centuries, as various political parties have risen and fallen from power, the Senate's rules have been respected and followed. One of those rules is the legislative filibuster, which protects the minority party's rights by requiring a 60-vote threshold to pass legislation in the Senate. Unfortunately, many of today's Democrats in Washington only care about one thing: radically transforming this nation into a new socialist state. And they'll use any means necessary to keep their grip on the federal government. Now we're seeing Democrat leadership in the Congress wield their historically narrow majority to push one partisan bill after another without even attempting to get Republican input or support. Instead of working together with their Republican colleagues, they're searching for ways to make it easier to jam through progressive socialist policies without any compromise. Just look at the Majority Leader's most recent statements on the filibuster. Last week, the Majority Leader wrote a letter to all Democrat senators explaining his plans to fundamentally and permanently alter the rules of the United States Senate and change the legislative filibuster. His statements could not be more hypocritical or self-serving. The legislative filibuster, which has been in place for decades, has been repeatedly defended as a vital and necessary rule to protect minority parties' rights, including by Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and even Senator Schumer. In 2017, Senator Schumer urged then Majority Leader Connell to, quote, find a way to build a firewall around the legislative filibuster, which is the most important distinction between the Senate and the House. He went on to say, quote, without the 60-vote threshold for legislation, the Senate becomes a majoritarian institution like the House, much more subject to the winds of short-term electoral change. No senator would like to see that happen, so let's find a way to further protect the 60-vote rule for legislation. Madam President, these are the direct quotes from the senator from New York. He called the filibuster the most important distinction between the Senate and the House, and now he has turned his back on it. Of course, my colleague from New York isn't the only one caught in a bind here by previous statements and actions. Let's remember that in 2018, the current Senate Majority Whip, Senator Dick Durbin, said, doing away with the legislative filibuster would be, quote, would be the end of the Senate as it was originally devised and created, going back to our founding fathers. He further admitted, and quote, we have to acknowledge our respect for the minority, and that is what the Senate tries to do in its composition and its procedure. I'll remember in 2017 when 32 Democrats signed a bipartisan letter urging Senate leadership to keep the sacred part of the Senate intact. Most of those same senators who defended minority party rights are still in office today, but only one has expressed any opposition to Senator Schumer's plans to destroy the filibuster, now that he is in the majority. And just last Congress, most of the Democrat caucus used the filibuster to block a police reform bill from my Republican colleague, Tim Scott, and a bill that would have protected newborn babies who survived attempted abortions. So my Democrat colleagues think the filibuster is great when it works in their favor, but they can't stand it when it blocks the radical socialist agenda, an agenda we know the American people do not support. So why the change of mind? Why are they willing to be so blatantly hypocritical and so obviously flip-flop? Because they know if they pull this off and pass this radical, dangerous bill to federalize election, it will all but secure their power into the future. That's what we're talking about here. Democrats want to push this bill through this bill that will completely upend our current election system, and they're willing to abandon their principles and flip-flop on the filibuster if it means permanently maintaining power. Senator Schumer admitted it earlier today on MSNBC. He said the quiet part out loud and explained that Democrat senators are saying things like, "I'll lose my election," or "we'll lose our majority if they don't change the filibuster and pass their election takeover bill." Democrats say this is about voting rights. It isn't. The right to vote is more readily accessible and easily exercised by eligible voters across our country than ever before. This is really about federalizing our elections and enacting policies that they think will give them an advantage in future elections. And all along the way, they will revel in their hypocrisy and self-righteously pretend that they are, quote, protecting democracy. But make no mistake, a change to the filibuster won't protect democracy. It will ruin it. Madam President, Democrats in this chamber can posture all they want, but the American people see them for what they really are, self-serving, power-hungry politicians. We all know that if the Democrats' bill was good, if it included policies that would actually improve our nation's elections, it would pass. But there is nothing in the bill worth voting for. The Democrats' bill is an assault on American elections. It will fuel voter fraud, waste taxpayer dollars on political campaigns and attack ads, and make it nearly impossible to conduct fair elections that our citizens can trust. We need an end to this self-serving hypocrisy, and we need members who will stand up for what's right. I'm urging my Democrat colleagues to see past their party's own partisan short-term interests and have to ask them to consider the health and future of our democracy. That's what the American people deserve. Madam President, I yield the floor.
To hold on to power. One, but two partisan power grab. National championship game. Madam President.
The senator from Texas.
Madam President, just this week, we saw the college football national championship game. There are a lot of tremendous athletes engaged in tremendous feats of skill and strength. But I have to say, there wasn't an athlete on the field that demonstrated the flexibility that we are seeing in the United States Senate right now. We are today seeing Democrats in the Senate, with the active encouragement of President Joe Biden, engaging on not one but two partisan power grabs, and doing them both with a twist. Let me explain. Democrats are desperate to hold on to power. It's their number one priority. It's more important than anything else. It's more important than jobs in our economy to Democrats. It's more important than getting kids back to school. It's more important than defeating COVID. Nothing matters more to today's Democrats than stay in power no matter what. How do we know that? Well, the very first bill introduced in the House of Representatives, H.R. 1, it's a bill many of us call the Corrupt Politicians Act. It's a bill designed to keep Democrats in power forever. That was Nancy Pelosi's #1 priority. The very first bill introduced in this chamber, S1, is likewise the Corrupt Politicians Act, a bill designed to keep Democrats in power forever. It is the #1 priority of elected Democrats. When that failed to get sufficient votes to pass, Democrats shifted to option 1B. Option 1B has the same objective: keep Democrats in power forever, but it's through a little twist of a sleight of hand. Now, Democrats want to subject every significant decision concerning voting to the unreviewable, in most instances, arbitrary power of an unelected bureaucrat in the Federal Department of Justice. My state of Texas has 29 million people. Those 29 million people have democratic rights. They have rights to elect legislatures that reflect their views, their policies, their values. You know what Senate Democrats say? We don't care. We don't care what those 29 million people want. We, the Democrats, want to stay in power. So let's take, for example, photo ID. I have in my wallet my driver's license. Most people do. Voter ID is a policy that is supported by the overwhelming majority of Americans. Roughly 80% of Americans support voter ID requiring a driver's license to vote. 2/3 of African American voters support voter ID. It is overwhelmingly supported across the country. You know who doesn't support it? Elected Democrats. Sadly, every single Democrat in this chamber has been willing to go on board with proposals to strike down voter ID laws. And here's what the Democrats want to do. They want to say that even though the voters of Texas want voter ID, because we want elections with integrity, we want to know that if you come in and vote and say your name is John Doe, that you're not somebody else pretending to be that person. Congressional Democrats don't care. They want to have an unelected bureaucrat with the ability to strike that down. Likewise, ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting is one of the most corrupt practices on this country. It's the practice whereby paid political operatives go and collect the ballots of other people. So, for example, you have a young operative from the DNC come into a nursing home and go room to room. Now, some of those residents may no longer be competent to make a choice. They may not be aware of their surrounding. But for an unscrupulous operative, that doesn't stop them. That operative can sit there and say, "Sir, ma'am, you want to vote for so-and-so, don't you?" Can fill out the ballot for them. And you know what? If there's some obstreperous senior in a nursing home who says, "Gosh, I really want to vote for the other guy," well, it's very simple for the unscrupulous operative to take that ballot. This ballot's for the other guy, and magically it ends up in the trash. Never gets mailed in. They can just mail in the ballots that they agree with, throw away the ballots they disagree with. There's a reason the majority of states have made ballot harvesting illegal. It invites voter fraud. By the way, Madam President, it wasn't long ago when people on both sides of the aisle recognized this. The most significant bipartisan effort examining voter fraud, the study of a bipartisan commission called the Carter-Baker Commission. Baker is former Republican Secretary of State James Baker. Carter is former Democratic President Jimmy Carter. The Carter-Baker Commission concluded that voter ID was an important step to stopping voter fraud. The Carter-Baker Commission concluded that voter fraud was a real and significant problem undermining the integrity of elections. And the Carter-Baker Commission identified ballot harvesting as one of the most dangerous practices encouraging voter fraud. As I said, the Carter and Carter-Baker Commission was former Democratic President Jimmy Carter. Hardly a right-wing Republican operative by any stretch of the imagination. It used to be, when sanity was permissible in the Democratic Party, that people would acknowledge the obvious. Unfortunately, we're in hyper-partisan times. And so today, Senate Democrats want to be able to have laws on voter ID, want to be having laws prohibiting ballot harvesting, struck down by one unelected bureaucrat. And by the way, who is that bureaucrat? Currently, it's a woman named Kristen Clark, head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice. Ms. Clark is one of the most radical partisan nominees ever to serve in the United States Department of Justice. She is one of the leading advocates in the country for abolishing the police. By the way, every single Democrat in this chamber voted to confirm her, despite the fact that she's one of the leading advocates in the country for abolishing the police. She has been a hardcore, left-wing, partisan advocate her entire life. Now, she's entitled to have her views. She's entitled to believe those views passionately, but here's what Senate Democrats want to do. They want to take this one person and say, she can strike down the laws adopted by legislatures elected by 29 million Texans. That's extraordinary. Now, Madam President, what could justify such a thing? Well, we saw Joe Biden give an incredibly demagogic, racist speech accusing half the country of being racist, of being Bull Connor. The Democrats say this is Jim Crow 2.0. And you know, Madam President, ironically, and I think inadvertently, the Democrats are telling the truth. They don't mean to be, but they are. What was Jim Crow 1.0? Jim Crow 1.0 were laws that were written almost exclusively by elected Democrats. You look at the authors of Jim Crow, they were Democrats, as were the founders of the Ku Klux Klan. And the purpose of Jim Crow laws was to do one thing: stop the voters from voting Democrats out of office. Because you look at the African Americans who were freed from slavery, they were electing Republicans. In many instances, they were electing black Republicans. And the Democrats didn't want that. How dare the voters select someone not from their party? And so Jim Crow was written to strip the right to vote from the voters who dared to vote against Democrats. Well, fast forward to today. The Corrupt Politicians Act is Jim Crow 2.0. It is once again written by Democrats to strip the right to vote from the American people to prevent them from voting Democrats out of office. Listen, a lot of Democrats are really nervous right now. Pretty much everyone in Washington recognizes that in November, we're going to see a wave election. Pretty much everyone in Washington understands that in November, Republicans are going to retake the House of Representatives, probably by a big margin. And there's a very good possibility we'll retake the Senate as well. Democrats can't defend their policies. They can't defend the rampant inflation that is hammering seniors and working class people across the country. They can't defend the chaos at the open borders. They can't defend the jobs being destroyed. They can't defend the lawless and abusive vaccine mandates, and they certainly can't defend their catastrophic, to be seen with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Even while Biden was giving this racially demagogic speech, which Stacey Abrams has made a career of doing, Ms. Abrams did not show up for the speech. She said she had a scheduling conflict. Madam President, you and I have both served some time in the Senate. We've both seen instances where the President of the United States was visiting our home states. I can tell you, as a senator, you make time to be there if you want to be there. It's clear Ms. Abrams did not want to be there, that she looked at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and sees their poll numbers plummeting. She sees their policies failing, and she wanted to be nowhere near that. So what's the Democrats' approach? If they can't win on the merits, if they can't defend their policy failures, if they can't convince the voters, then let's go back to the Jim Crow policies the Democrats authored to begin with. This is Jim Crow 2.0. Strip away the power of the voters to make a choice, put an unelected bureaucrat in charge of election laws, and throw out the decisions of 29 million Texans. Madam President, I'll tell you this, Democrats don't get to claim they're defending democracy when they are literally taking away the rights of Democratic elected legislatures. That's many things, but it ain't democracy. One unelected bureaucrat overruling 29 million Texans is not democracy. It's a power grab. But I told you this was a power grab on top of a power grab with a twist. The second power grab is, how are they going to try to pass the Corrupt Politicians Act? They're going to do it by nuking the filibuster. The rules of the Senate, written in that book that sit on the dais in front of you, say that to proceed to legislation takes 60 votes in this Senate, takes 60% of the senators. Those are the Senate rules. They're black and white, they're clear. If you don't like the Senate rules, there's a way to change that. You can amend the Senate rules. It takes 67 votes to amend the Senate rules. A number of us have proposed amending the Senate rules. I myself have repeatedly gone to Democrats saying I'd be happy to work with Democrats on proposals to amend the Senate rules to allow senators on both sides to offer more amendments. Democrats haven't been willing to do so. Instead, what Democrats intend to do, what they want to do, what President Biden is urging them to do, is to break the Senate rules, to change the Senate rules. It's called nuking the filibuster. If their plan is successful, Senator Schumer will stand up and seek a ruling from the chair as to whether it takes 60 votes or 50 votes to proceed to legislation. The chair will say, if the chair is following the rules, it takes 60 votes. And then Senator Schumer will move to reconsider the ruling of the chair and overrule the ruling of the chair and say, even though the words on the page say 60 votes, from now on it's 50. It's another brazen power grab. Now, Madam President, there may be some folks at home who are a little cynical of the partisan times we find ourselves in, who are skeptical of claims perhaps made by both sides. But maybe you're a Democrat at home, and I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative Republican. You might be saying, you know what, if it's Cruz saying it, I'm a Democrat, I don't believe it. I understand that. This is a very partisan time. There's a lot of disagreements. So if you're a Democrat at home and you're inclined not to believe what I say, I'm going to suggest perhaps some people you can believe. I told you it was a double power grab with a twist. I want to point to you the words of President Joe Biden. If you're not inclined to believe a Republican, maybe you'll believe Joe Biden. Here's what Joe Biden said in 2019. This is not 1964. This is not 1954. 2019, a couple of years ago. Quote, ending the filibuster is a very dangerous move. If you're at home and you don't believe Republicans, do you believe Joe Biden? Was he lying when he said ending the filibuster is a very dangerous move, or was he telling the truth? Because that's what Joe Biden said just a couple of years ago. Now maybe you say, well, he was in a campaign, people say things, you can't hold him to fault for saying that. That's not fair. Okay? All right, so now you don't believe me and you don't believe Joe Biden. But let's see if we can find someone else. How about someone who serves in this chamber right now? How about someone who is the Senate Majority Leader right now? How about Senator Chuck Schumer? If you haven't actually watched this speech, I'd encourage you, go pull out your phone and Google it. You can find it real easily. Senator Chuck Schumer in 2015 gave a speech. I'm going to read to you verbatim what he said. He said they want, because they can't get their way, to change the rules midstream. All right, what would be the effect of that? You change the rules midstream, you nuke the filibuster. What would be the effect of that? According to Chuck Schumer, the effect of that, to wash away 200 years of history. That's what Schumer says is the effect. Washing away 200 years of history, that sounds serious. Anything else? They want a country into a banana republic, where if you don't get your way, you change the rules. Wash away 200 years of history, make this country a banana republic. That's pretty serious stuff. That ought to concern us, but at least that's the worst it gets, right? Well, actually, no, Schumer continued. It'll be doomsday for democracy if we do. Madam President, there are reporters teeming the United States Capitol. Any reporter who wants to be something other than a partisan shill and mouthpiece for the Democrats ought to ask every single Democrat, Senator so-and-so, do you agree with Chuck Schumer that ending the filibuster will turn our nation into a banana republic? Do you agree, Senator so-and-so, that ending the filibuster would be doomsday for democracy? And by the way, if there are any reporters left who actually have journalistic ethics, you shouldn't just ask Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Right now, they're the lone Democrats with the gumption to stand up for democracy. But you ought to ask all 50 of them, every single one of the Democrats. Do you agree with Chuck Schumer ending the filibuster is doomsday for democracy? And if not, why? Is it just that your team is the one that can't get their way? Now it's your side that wants to change the rules midstream. Now it's your side that if you don't get your way, you change the rules. Was Joe Biden lying in 2019? Was Senator Schumer lying in 2005? I don't know, you ought to ask them. A double power grab with a twist. Jim Crow 2.0, seizing federal elections, striking down the laws adopted by Democratic legislatures, putting an unelected radical leftist bureaucrat in charge of elections with more power, this one leftist bureaucrat, than all 29 million people in the state of Texas. Doing so by breaking the Senate rules to change the Senate rules, and the twist is with a dose of hypocrisy, unusual even for this place. Look, if a senator serves long enough, there'll be times when they may vote a little bit this way or a little bit that way. There are lots of senators that have had tensions with prior positions. I cannot think of another time when a senator has voted for something that he has called doomsday for democracy. That's not just a little hypocritical. And by the way, all the Democrats agreed with him. They were all standing shoulder to shoulder. In 2005, when Senator Schumer said this, he was either lying or telling the truth. If he was lying, I guess you should ask him why he was lying. If he was telling the truth, I guess you should ask 48 Democrats who don't care why they're willing to vote for doomsday for democracy. You want to understand the dangers of this double power grab with a twist? Look no further than the vicious, partisan, divisive, hateful speech President Biden gave, insulting half this country, oddly enough, blaming Republicans for the sins of his own party, the Democratic Party, who wrote Jim Crow and founded the KKK. All of us were sitting outside in the Capitol when President Biden gave his inauguration speech, when he talked about unity, when he talked about healing. You want to see the vicious partisanship that ending the filibuster will produce? You saw it. A double power grab with a twist of hypocrisy. Madam President, if there is a Democrat in this chamber who gives a damn about democracy, let me urge you, don't vote for what your own leader has called doomsday for democracy. I yield the floor.